Hi, this is State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Rakedahl. Thank you so much for listening in on Washington's ESSA Consolidated Plan. As you know, we have an amazing opportunity in our state to think about student success and accountability in ways we've never thought of before. We're moving past No Child Left Behind. We're focusing on ways our agency can partner with local school districts, parents, and community to support all of our kids. To do that, we're focused on equity. Our accountability plan takes a deep dive using data to help us understand how to improve outcomes for all of our students, every group of them, at every school district level. Thank you so much for listening in. We hope it's informative. Please reach out to us if you have additional questions.
Hello. Thanks, Chris. We are going to move forward now and talk a little bit about Implementation 101 today, moving through the what and the why. We're going to start with a little bit of the deep dive about the why. As everyone knows, in January, our Every Student Succeeds application was approved by the department, and it focuses on the 4 areas that you see on the screen: pursuing equity through closing achievement gaps and opportunity gaps, the continuous improvement for all schools, obtaining and retaining effective educators, and using a more flexible approach to resources. As we think about the emphasis ESSA has on improvement, we need to focus on an improvement mindset. Everyone is in this business of improvement, and every school, likewise, will receive the data around the accountability system in mid-March. This is important because every school in the state has places where they're looking to improve. Every principal, every superintendent knows that there is improvement to be had in schools, and so that likewise every school will receive data in mid-March, around their own school improvement. Schools will be identified for support to improve student learning. They are not identified as failing. This is an improvement shift in a place that we need it. Most importantly, moving away from No Child Left Behind into ESSA requires that all schools are in the business of improvement. We also acknowledge that the different needs require different kinds of support. And so the focus in our agency is looking at those different supports and looking at those different requirements out in schools and districts around those supports. So as we're shifting our work at the agency, likewise, we know districts will look at the needs and the supports as they start to implement ESSA. Also, this change will take some time. Over the next year, you will see some immediate changes in our school improvement office, but over time, you'll see that this is work that extends beyond just one office, but across all divisions at OSPI. So as we look to explore new opportunities to innovate in schools, please give us feedback as we're doing this and how it's impacting your own individual district. The work of the agency, obviously, over time has been around work individually with students. But as we move into this new approach with ESSA, it's even more important to analyze the needs of students, the needs of teacher leaders, the needs of you as district and school leaders, and then us at OSPI impacting that change. So we will continue to work closely with the ESDs. We also know many of you as district and school leaders come directly to OSPI for guidance or support or grants and resources in order to do your work. So this image on the screen indicates that we know, even though sometimes we feel far away from the immediate impact of students, we know that our work here ultimately impacts them in the long run.
This is Deb Kame. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Assessment and Student Information, and I'm going to be walking through the what about the accountability framework. This page is a very high-level verbal overview of the accountability framework, the data that are underneath how Washington schools are being identified for support. ESSA says that states must annually meaningfully differentiate schools and specifies some measures that must be included and gives flexibility on other measures. So I'll introduce those measures in a minute. Washington's framework in a nutshell is that each measure is mapped from a percentage to a 1 to 10 score. And what I mean by that is that each measure, let's say mathematics proficiency, has a percentage, say 64%. We will convert or map that to a number between 1 and 10. So each measure for each school and student group will have a score between 1 to 10. Those measure scores are combined to yield an overall index score ranging from 1 to 10. The measures are weighted. I'll show you those weights in a moment. And their 1 to 10 scores are rolled together for an overall score. And then using that ESSA index score, the lowest performing 5% of schools are identified as comprehensive support schools. Schools will be identified for targeted support using the same threshold for specific student groups. This approach emphasizes continuous improvement for all schools and not just whether a school is on or off a list. Opportunity gaps and room for improvement will be visible by individual measure and overall for all schools. This table shows the indicator categories by grade band. One row has check marks for the elementary and middle school indicators, and the other row shows the high school ones. ESSA specifies 5 areas to be included in the accountability framework. The first 4 areas were prescribed. So academic proficiency in English, language, arts, and math, that's number 1. Student growth, which for Washington is student growth percentiles. This is just in the lower grade levels, so elementary and middle school. Third is English learner progress. This measure is based on English language acquisition using the ELPA 21 assessment. It includes only students who are English learners. 4 is graduation rate, and the core of the grad rate indicator is the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. Washington is also incorporating the 5, 6, and 7-year rates in a new way, and I'll describe that in a couple of minutes. And 5th, ESSA gave states flexibility in this area, which is called school quality or student success, or SQSS. For Washington, there are 3 measures for SQSS. One is regular attendance, perhaps more commonly known as the flip side of that, which is chronic absenteeism. So did a student miss more than 10% of school days? For a student enrolled all year, that would be 18 full days of school. Second SQSS measure is 9th graders on track. What percent of 9th graders earned credit or passed each attempted course in 9th grade? And then thirdly, dual credit, and this is a measure of access. What percentage of students in grades 9 through 12 participated in a dual credit course within a school year? The dual credit categories that are included are Running Start, AP, IB, College in the High School, Cambridge, and Tech Prep or CTE dual credit. So each grade band has 4 of the 5 indicator buckets. The lower grades have a growth measure, and high school has a graduation instead. And a K-12 school would have all of these measures. So the weights. Here are the weights that are used to combine the individual measures into a total score. Each of the pie charts has 4 slices, corresponding to the indicator buckets on the previous slide. Growth in elementary and middle, and graduation rate in high school have the largest share, 50%. In the lower grade levels, school quality or student success, the attendance measure, is a relatively small percent of the total score. It's 5%. Recall that there are 3 measures in high school for SQSS: attendance, 9th graders on track, and dual credit. And those are 15% combined for the high school. English learner progress is 5%. That's a relatively small weight, but there is a separate support category specific to schools that are struggling with the progress of English learners. These weights will shift a little bit if a school doesn't have a score for a particular measure. The full table of weighting scenarios is available within the approved ESSA plan. So the ESSA index on the lowest performing 5%. So as I mentioned earlier, each measure gets a score between 1 and 10. Those numbers for each measure have been spread out so that about 10% of schools are assigned each number. That is, about 10% of schools get a 1 for ELA proficiency, about 10% get a 2, and so on. And then about 10% of high schools get a 10 for graduation, about 10% get a 9, and so on. So each school gets a score for each of their measures, and those are combined to yield an overall index score. Those overall scores, the index scores, are sorted, and that will be used to identify the lowest performing 5% of schools or comprehensive schools. So we set a threshold to identify the lowest performing 5% of schools, and that is called out in the Every Student Succeeds Act. We'll draw a line where those 5%, where there are 5% of schools below it. Let's just say that that threshold is numerically in the low 2s, marked by the line on the right side. We will then use that same threshold in the low 2s for student groups to identify areas for targeted support. I've described this so far at the school level, but this also carries over for student groups. Each student group will also get measure scores and an overall index score if the group is large enough to be included. The student groups are the 7 federal race or ethnic categories, also students with disabilities, English learners, and students who are economically disadvantaged. So there are 10 student groups included in the framework, as well as the all students or group. So we have a line marking the threshold for support, and that same line is used for both comprehensive and targeted. So in this hypothetical example, this school has 4 student groups whose index scores are below the threshold. Although the all students index score is a bit higher, there are some student groups that need more support. And this would be a school that's identified for targeted support. Graduation rate. So the graduation rate indicator has the 4-year rate as its foundation, and for which schools will receive a 1 to 10 score. Then a school may get extra credit or an additional point or 2 based on the extended year graduation rates. That extra credit is based on additional percentage of students that graduate in the extended timeframes, with 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years. Schools that graduate the highest percentage of students in the 5th, 6th, and 7th years will move up 2 points, so get 2 extra credit points on the 1 to 10 scale. And the next highest schools will move up 1 point. Most schools will stay at the 1 to 10 scores that were determined by the 4-year graduation rate. Timeline. This table shows the time frame for data that are included in the index, as well as the support timeline. It's a 3-year cycle. The first round of ESSA identification and support is right now in the 17-18 school year, and the data are combining the 3 prior years of data, 14-15, 15-16, and 16-17. That's the green box in the upper left. So it's 3 years of combined data. The support plan based on these will be for 3 subsequent years, so 18-19, 19-20, and 20-21. And those are the 3 blue years to the upper right. 3 years from now, during the 2021 school year, there will be the next round of identification, and it will be based on 3 years of data again, this time using data from this current school year and then the next 2. Note that at that time, science will be included, in addition to ELA and mathematics. Also, other school quality or student success measures will be considered to be included at that time. A sample display. So this is what OSPI's website display of ESSA data will look like initially. On a single page, it shows quite a bit of information. It shows performance by indicator at the top, and you can see it for all students, or you can filter to show the indicators for any particular student group. In the lower half, you can see performance across student groups for any particular indicator or for the index overall. So you can visually scan across indicators at the top, or you can scan across student groups on the bottom. So these views will be made available publicly for all schools on March 14th. So whether a school is above or below the line, all schools have room for improvement and room to close opportunity gaps. This is just an illustration of communications that are coming out. On the left is an infographic that explains the system. And on the right is a data sheet, or the visualization that will be showing information about the schools, a one-page printout by school. And this is 2 images that are part of the public data posting that will be available. These are actual screenshots. These sample schools are posted right now. The website address is on the lower part of the screen, and it will give you an idea of how information will be displayed.
My name is Tennille Jeffries Simmons, Assistant Superintendent, System and School Improvement. Now I'm going to walk you through the how of our presentation as it relates to system and school support. What you can see on this slide is a side-by-side really highlighting some areas of difference between the system that we are transitioning out of, NCLB, and the system that we are transitioning towards. The purpose of this slide is just to give you a quick view of some of the measures that are different in this system. You can also see here on the right side of the slide the emphasis around all students and disaggregated by student population. Again, for the purposes of comparing where we have been and where we're headed, you can see on the left an overview of required action districts, priority and focus, and then following the section that you just had on accountability, the measures that we are using in the ESSA system on the right. Here's a visual of one of the differences between the shift in methodology. Again, NCLB on the left, where we were identifying the lowest 10% of schools in priority and focus, and now it's a representation of how the system has changed based on establishing a baseline of performance and then identifying schools that fall below that threshold as either comprehensive or targeted. In the NCLB era, there was really one type of approach that was deployed to support schools that were identified for improvement. The supports were relatively undifferentiated, and you can see moving right on this slide, following the green arrow at the bottom of the slide, that we're now heading towards a more differentiated support model organized by tier, where supports are differentiated and then matched to the need. Foundational and self-directed being available for a larger number of schools, and then as we move towards those comprehensive schools, which require most of our support and organization and partnership, they will have access to those foundational and self-directed supports and then additional supports. This slide is a quick view of how we're thinking about our work in system and school improvement, focusing on studying, support, and then serving. So studying, what are the supports that are needed? Support, what are the supports that we have available based on what we have seen as a need? And then how are we going to deploy those supports in an effective manner? Some examples of steps that the agency is taking in anticipation of fall 18-19 is we're partnering with CISL inside of the agency to complete a professional learning and technical assistance inventory. We're also working on a comprehensive communication plan to schools and, for example, looking to partner differently with superintendents as they plan their communication efforts inside of their school districts. We're also working across the agency to implement a common web presence as a strategy for simplifying the exercise of finding tiered supports on OSPI's website. Examples of what those common web pages may look like can be found on this slide, and then again on this slide. I'll spend a little bit more time here because it highlights the common organization on program pages that we are aiming towards. What we're looking for is a strategy that would allow someone from the field to know that irrespective of what program they were looking to gain more information about, that they would be able to use a common strategy for finding that information. So these icons we're looking to have present across the website as a way of simplifying the complex work of resource gathering in the field. Here you can see our notification and support timelines from left to right. The date is on the far left is very close to the recording of this webinar because those in advance calls to comprehensive will be beginning very soon, ideally this week. We're also going to be communicating with schools in another way in advance of that public release of data the week of March 12th. As I mentioned just a few moments ago, we're partnering with ESDs to organize a variety of superintendent sessions where we can meet in person with superintendents and collaborate with them around messaging, and then also supporting them to make sure that the questions that they may have about their data are answered as they're determining how best to lead in their school systems. Immediately following those sessions, we'll be partnering across the agency to hold a number of statewide Zoom meetings. The target audience for those Zooms will not be superintendents, they will be district level administrators or even principals. And so the content of the information being shared in those Zoom meetings will be appropriate and tailored for those audiences. Another view of our notification and support timelines can be found in this table. I'd like to draw your attention to the coordination with ESDs, that it will be following district notification, but you can see that across the board our strategy is to provide information at the right time to ESDs. So as you are contacting your ESD, if your ESD is a partner in your daily work, that you're able to know that they're aware of the questions that you are grappling with at the time that you call.
Thank you for listening to the information that we've been providing. This next slide is more information to come, and more information to come includes my name. I'm Gail Pauley, Assistant Superintendent for Special Programs and Federal Accountability. We're working with staff across the agency and many of you in our work to really take a look at the fiscal guidance that will help you in your planning and your support of your schools. We're looking at a new electronic grant system, which we believe will really lighten the load on all of us, not just our district folks that have been doing our I-grants for many, many years, and many of those I-grants were separately done for a federal or a state program. We're looking at a way to consolidate many sections of the program requirements and put those into an I-grants system. We're also looking at how to revise our consolidated program reviews to include many different component parts of what can be considered monitoring. From the very first start in our conversations with you as districts and what you put into your plan, your consolidated plan, to the implementation and the supports that you provide to the students that you serve through those programs and plans. We're looking at tiered supports, as you heard Tennille speak to earlier, What are those supports that could be put into place to help you? And looking at systems that you have been working with for a long time through multi-tiered systems of supports, MTSS, and how you look at the levels of support you provide to schools, to students, and the supports that you provide to teachers and helping them obtain the skills and instructional practices that will help them in work that they do with their children, their students. We also have a component part that runs across all of our federal programs, and that's the inclusion of families, parents, and notification information that we will be providing to you on how you actively engage parents with you in decisions like what goes into the school support plans for comprehensive and targeted schools. The last bullet on this page talks about model communication documents. We've had these in the past. We will continue with many of these, so letters that might need to go to a parent to inform them of the qualifications or their right to ask for the qualifications of their teacher, of their child in a Title I school, and many other different kinds of communications as we go through implementation of ESSA and as we work with you and having you help us identify what those communications need to be. So with that information, we thank you for your attention, and please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us. We'd be more than happy to help you think through the parts of the information that was provided to you today.